we spoke with you at Flow FM about the delay in releasing the Royal Commission report on mental health, and then there was this joint setting organised suddenly by the Premier, and saw yourself and the opposition leader speaking there, and it just felt to me, to my eyes, the Premier tried to set this up as a bipartisan moment in front of people who have suffered with mental health neglect, or families of people who've they've lost to suicide. And yourself and the opposition leader really actually got stuck into the government on that occasion. Is that fair to say?
I don't think it was made political by any means at all. But we need to acknowledge where we're at the moment and where we've been over the past decade or so in terms of fixing Victoria's mental health system. I think that in some ways there's been a glossing over by the government of what's happened over the past 7 years that Daniel Andrews has been Premier, and try to sweep it under the carpet. And certainly for the last 2 years, all we've heard is that we can't fix Victoria's mental health system because we're having a Royal Commission. And to my mind, that's simply not good enough. We've got people who haven't been able to access the help they need, which has meant that they've suffered much more trauma and may have caused lasting damage. We've got people who, children who haven't been able to get the interventions that they need, which we know when kids can get the right support early on in life, it often means that they can resolve and appropriately manage their mental health the mental ill health through the rest of their life. And sadly, there's people who couldn't access the support they need, and they're no longer with us today. We can't simply ignore that. I think that those people who fell through the cracks deserve to be recognised, and until we see some lasting change and improvement in Victoria's mental health system, then it's my job as the Shadow Minister for Mental Health to hold the government to account, because simply having a big event where we're tabling a Royal Commission report or having a photo opportunity or putting out a media release, that does not make a biggest difference to the people who can't get the mental health support that they need when they need it. And so I'll continue to hold the government to account until we get the mental health services that we need in Western Victoria and across the state. And we're simply so far behind at the moment that the government's got an enormous amount of work to do, but we need to keep that vision. We need to keep fighting for it and make sure that we get there and public mental health services are accessible in all of Victoria.
Well said. And one thing that I picked up watching the testimony from some selected individuals who spoke, I think, before yourself, about their own testimonies, and I didn't quickly look at the map where they came from, but it seemed they were from Western Victoria, a farmer and a young lady who both spoke, or they're certainly from regional Victoria. And is there a concern that the mental health services, particularly in your electorate but regional areas, are still going to track behind what might be made available in the metropolitan area?
Yeah, it's always something that we're fighting for, is to make sure that country Victoria gets its fair share, because too often we see money just either funneled into Melbourne, or when it's tagged as being for regional Victoria, it doesn't extend beyond Ballarat, Bendigo and Geelong. And obviously along the South Australian border, we can be 3 or 4 hours from those centres. So it's simply not okay to say, well, we've ticked that box, we've invested in regional Victoria because we've put a new bed in Geelong. It just doesn't work that way. So I've certainly been calling for more investment in public mental health support in our patch over in far western Victoria, and particularly have been fighting for ongoing funding for the rural outreach workers. That funding's due to cease at the end of this financial year. We've also got the government at the same time saying, well, they're going to bring in a mental health tax or levy, and it's just really hard to justify how our local people should be paying a mental health tax if they're going to lose the only public mental health service that they have access to at the moment at the end of June this year.
Which service is that, sorry?
The rural outreach workers, it's coordinated through the Wimmera Primary Care Partnership. So the Wimmera Primary Care Partnership it does a fantastic job. They fill the gaps and the cracks in Victoria's public health system, and they've worked up and really been the driving force behind the Rural Outreach Worker Program. That's in coordination with councils in West Wimmera, Hindmarsh and Yarra Yambiak, and the health services in that region too. And it's basically a service where a person will get referred to these rural outreach workers. They'll go and reach out, visit them at home, It's that sort of preventative or proactive model where perhaps someone hasn't turned up to footy training for a while, or they know maybe there's been a marriage breakdown or some sort of unsettling in a family, and they'll actually proactively go out, check in, chat to a mate, talk to a mate used to be the slogan, and see what help they can be. And they'll link them in then with mental health support, a GP, they might send them to a financial planner, those sort of supports in place, and keep an eye on them until they get their life back on track. It's, a brilliant service, and to lose funding or lose that opportunity to have access to rural outreach workers would be disastrous for our region. We would have zero frontline public mental health support in Western Victoria. But also PCP funding is at risk this year too. So we've got a lot of fighting to do to make sure we get fair investment to Western Victoria, but I'm up for the fight, and we'll continue to make sure we hold the government to account to get that investment and get our fair share. For anyone who is in crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114, suicide callback line 1800 659 467, men's line 1300 789 978, or kids helpline 1800 551 800. That Lifeline number again, 131114.